Aloha, everybody. Welcome to Hawaii. Welcome to PhotoCon. It's nice to see everybody once again. This is our first presentation of the year for PhotoCon Hawaii. We're looking forward to having several more and on different topics all the way through. And then September 11th and 12th at Kualoa Ranch, we'll have an outdoor event, COVID permitting, and we all know how that goes. Today, we have a really exciting day presentation with Charles Werner. Charles is a fire chief, among many other things, but one of the things that he has done successfully is he's got a company called DRONERESPONDERS, and it's DRONERESPONDERS.org. If you particularly are in charge of drones in your capacity and for emergency, law enforcement, disaster protection, things like that, please register into DRONERESPONDERS.org. Support him. What a lot of companies do and entities across the country, they look to drone responders for good advice. They have a lot of experience and they're very, very knowledgeable and want to share it. So today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring in Chief Charles Werner. And Charles, come on in and say hi to the group and aloha to you. Charles is out there. He's coming in.
I'm here. Aloha. Okay, turn my webcam off. Okay, so I'm here. Can you see me now?
You welcome to Hawaii, buddy. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you bringing your wealth of knowledge and sharing it with us.
I'm glad to be here, and Drone Responders is all about being a resource for anyone who's looking for information about starting a drone program, and we'll go into all that and tell about it. But we're just glad to be here and have the opportunity to share it with you and all the people out there in Hawaii. Give a shout out to Ted Ralston, who I've worked with on a number of occasions, and his team in Hawaii. And we actually had some conversations when you guys were having all your volcanic activity out there. So it's been nice to see things a little bit calmer and always beautiful.
I'm happy to tell you I've had some good conversations with Ted and Scott Allen of the FAA, and those guys bring all sorts of information to me. As a commercial photographer, I see things from a very different point of view, and they have a very technical point of view. So it's been a really good joining of minds and creative thoughts and process. Charles, I'll leave it to you. We'll be around if we can butt in or help or do anything, and we'll do that. So to you, and I look forward to your presentation. Thank you again so much for being here.
Again, thanks for the opportunity. I'll take it from here. So if we can get the presentation up,
okay, presentation
we'll take off.
Coming up. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's get to the beginning. Anyway, let me give you a little background on myself because it's important you understand my journey so you can appreciate it. I spent 37 years in the Charlottesville Fire Department as a career firefighter and the last 10 years as fire chief, and I retired in 2015. But before I retired, I was always into technology, and so the last 2 years of my career in the fire service, 2014 and 2015, I really began to look at drones. And as I looked at drones, I started seeing a number of different ways drones could be used. Then I started calling around the country as I see news stories pop up. And what was interesting is I would call and learn from people who had done things, but what I found is most of the people that were flying illegally. So they didn't know the rules, they didn't know the regulations. And as I called, I remember one place I called and they were doing some shore patrols for sharks. And I said, hey, I'm calling about your program out there on shark patrol. And they said, you aren't with the FAA, are you? And so I knew then that they knew that they didn't have what they needed. But as time went on, I called Minneapolis and found out about their hazmat operations they were doing, saw what was happening in southern Manatee, Florida, with their program. And suddenly, after a period of time and probably interviewing 100 different departments, really started to understand what people were doing, what they wanted to do, and then about the regulations. And from that, I accidentally became a subject matter expert on public safety drones. What's involved with regulations, the difference between a certificate of authorization or COA in Part 107. What do you do with that? And then I got contacted by the National Fire Protection Association, who said, would you be interested in serving as the chair of the National Fire Protection Association Technical Committee on Public Safety US? And I said, I'd be honored to, as long as you bring some really good qualified people in the room that can help me walk through it, I'll be glad to facilitate that discussion. So we did that. It was the first multidiscipline standard that they had ever done in NFPA's history. And we, and a group of tremendous people, got the draft done, which is NFPA 2400, in 7 months, the fastest draft standard ever done at the National Fire Protection Association. And it was there that the collective of people that had come together had said, you know, we all are building on each other's knowledge. What can we do to help others? And at that point, I came up with the idea of the National Council on Public Safety US. And the idea was, let's create a repository, let's share information, and then let's go from there. And within 2 weeks, because of my affiliations at the national level, I was able to bring 30 organizations together in about 2 weeks. The good news is it was 30 national organizations, and on the bad side, the bad news was it was 30 national organizations. The other thing that we found is that we were not a formal entity. So about a year later, a friend of mine, Chris Todd, came and met with me. He runs the Airborne International Response Team, a 501c3 nonprofit organization in Florida. And he said, you know, what's happening with everything in your world? And I said, well, we're having a lot of traction, but we can't move because we're not an entity. And he said, well, why don't you bring the program under the Airborne International Response Team? And I said, okay. And he said, but let's be a little creative. So after about 2 weeks, we came up with the idea of let's create drone responders. So in April of 2019, Drone Responders was born. And what we've done is we'll go through a little more detail as we get to the end of the presentation about what we've done and where we're going. But now I want to take you a journey a little bit on the state of public safety drones, what we found in our study of 2020. So you kind of have a feel for what's happening. And then I'll have 2 videos that will show you a little bit more, some actual drone footage of drones being used in an emergency setting. So with that, we'll go to the next slide here. So when you look at this, you can see just a plethora of different applications. And I'm going to kind of just jump through these, you know, a little bit at a time to give you some mindset. In the upper left corner, if you look closely, you'll see a fire to the left side of the street and where a fire apparatus is positioned. But if you look on the right side, you can see that a fire has spread across to a flying brand on the roof of another structure behind the firefighters. Without the drone footage, that fire may have gotten a lot worse before it was detected. As we go to the right of that picture of the structure fire, we can now look at a structure fire, but we look at it from a different view. We're looking at it from a thermal image view, and we can see through the signature where the fire is in the structure, and it also gives us an idea of the areas in which there may be structural integrity issues, or where there may be fires that we weren't aware that existed. Now, as we move to the right in the same row, we see a traffic incident on a highway that's resulted in multiple vehicles on fire. Now, when you're responding as a firefighter on the ground, and you're coming in at a level view, you're not seeing anything except some fire and smoke. You don't know how many vehicles are involved. This drone's eye view gives us that way of looking at the fire to know what's the magnitude, how many things are involved, what resources are needed. As we continue to travel to the right in that top row, you can see that there's 2 gentlemen, they're looking at a screen watching the drone fly over. And on the right, you can see the thermal image view, and they have located the lost person. And what that has also done is indicated a lat-long location that they can provide to the rescuers that are slightly off to the left of the thermal screen in that picture. But what they can also do is they can see that right where that person is, to the immediate left of them, you can see they are bodies of water. So they're able to tell the people, the rescuers, to avoid those areas and be cautious as you're moving forward. To the right, in the last picture on the top row, you can see the imagery that's taken from the Hover app, which gives it the ability to do a complete 360 look around of that entire area. And this was put on a map following several of the major California fires. And it was able to give people that were evacuated a chance to go into their neighborhoods and see what the neighborhoods look like, good, bad, or worse. They needed to know what that looked like. So they were able to go in and do this, and it became very helpful. In addition, the insurance companies could see this information and already start to help those people that had lost everything. And what you also notice is that we were able to use this and combine it into a GIS layer, so that in some cases there was so much devastation, similar to a really bad hurricane, that you could not tell any geographic references. So we overlaid it with road maps, and we could see where the drone was flying or what the imagery was showing. Again, people wouldn't be able to see it. In the second row on the left, you'll see one of the protests that happened in Virginia. This is in Richmond, Virginia. And I'll tell you about a story about the Charlottesville one first. It's not on this picture, but in Charlottesville, we had a drone up. And for those of you who don't know, there was a protest that we had here. It was a Unite the Right rally. This is kind of where it all began in the United States, and it was over a statue. And in this case, the drone captured the very moment that the young man who was driving his car really fast down the road hit and killed Heather Heyer. So we saw that on video, and what that immediately did is gave us situational awareness that the resources that were needed to respond to that. And I think in the end, there were 29 injuries and 1 fatality. And amazingly, based on that information and the initiation of resources, every patient was transported to the hospital within 19 minutes. So again, it kind of shows you that picture. Now, next to the protest, well, let me talk about this protest first. In the protest in Richmond, what was unique about it is we started off, and the Virginia State Police was flying a helicopter overhead, and there was a report of 3 men with long guns. And the drone was able to fly over this crowd and in 3 minutes locate them, because they could fly under the tree canopy. They could use the zoom without really getting too close to the people, and actually fly off an angle that they weren't flying directly over the people. And from that moment on, the rest of the event, the drone footage was what was used the entire event. Now, as we move to the right on that second row, you'll see 2 pictures side by side. One is a structure fire with smoke, which is hiding the fire. And immediately to the right of that, you can see the thermal imagery, which shows the fire location, and you can also see the application of those water streams. What we're able to do now that's different is we're able to direct those streams based on the knowledge of what we're seeing of where it's being applied to the fire, and is actually having an effect on extinguishing it. In the past, we would be spraying, and oftentimes we were totally missing the fire because we couldn't see through the smoke. The next picture that you see to the right is the floods in Hurricane Harvey. And again, this is being able to now put something up very quickly after the storm has passed to determine how bad is bad. And this really tells us quickly just what our community's in for and how bad it is. As we move to the right, we're also seeing here a tornado that went through, I think, like 20 miles with a 3-mile wide swath. This was one of the first news stories that came on and indicated that searching was being done on the ground and in the air by drones simultaneously. So we were starting to see a transition of people using the drones much more quickly in the events. As we move to the right, you'll see here what's a tethered drone. And I'll talk a little bit more about tethered drones in a minute, but we're able to put a tethered drone in or on the fire apparatus and put it up immediately upon arriving at the scene of an incident, a fire, hazmat, or whatever. And we'll go into more detail shortly. We go down to the third row, and as you look to the left, you can see maybe something familiar to you all in Hawaii, the lava flows. We know that in the lava flows, we could use the drones to monitor its movement from a safe perspective. In addition, what happened in Hawaii is that when the fissures were erupting, the drones were actually able to use sulfur dioxide sensors and fly in different areas and identify where sulfur dioxide, which is invisible, but it's toxic, could be detected to warn people and evacuate people out of harm's way. The next picture that you're seeing next to the lava flow is the traffic crash reconstruction. and the ability now to go in and do 3D modeling of a traffic crash incident. And this is often done by departments in a fatality situation. So in that type of situation, this traffic crash reconstruction can typically be done in a third of the time, in about 20 minutes, with an accuracy of 1 centimeter, which means that now we can free the roads more quickly. And the most important aspect of that is it reduces secondary accidents, which we know happen at a lot of road crashes that occur. In addition to that, we have a 3D model that can be looked at from different angles and be looked at in perpetuity anytime we want to go back and look at it at a later time. As we go now to the third picture in that third row, we're seeing a train derailment. This happened to be in Lynchburg, Virginia. This was early on when drones really hadn't caught on widespread across the United States. And the story was the firefighters were there and they were in position trying to do a couple different things. One, extinguish the fire, but they were also dealing with a huge hazmat incident as the crude oil was pouring into the James River. And from that, they had a guy, just happened to be at the time a hobbyist, who was flying over and back and forth. And the police said, "Hey, what are you doing? Get out of here, get out of here." And then the fire chief said, "Wait a minute, what's he looking at?" And they said, "Well, he's looking at the train derailment." And he said, "Come over here, come over here." So they were able at that point to use his drone flying over to get the areas that were involved, number of cars, to see the areas that were being polluted into the river, and then could plan accordingly. And then to the right of that, what you're seeing is a nuclear power plant where you can now use this for critical infrastructure inspections. You can fly over and look at things at a very quick and easy way. But you can also now add artificial intelligence into this to fly over areas, and it will tell you, one, if something is different of any kind of major structural difference, or it might identify that people or vehicles are in areas that they shouldn't be, and can alert people automatically. So now we're starting to see drones and artificial intelligence, augmented reality, etc. So the next picture on the right is the Oroville Dam. That's where they were having issues and concerns of the spillway. They were concerned that it was deteriorating and it may have to cause evacuation of the community. The drones were able to fly constantly to look at the changes and determine that they actually did not have as bad a problem as they thought, and it wasn't going to require evacuations. In the bottom left, what you can see there is the FirstNet drone that was used to fly in Puerto Rico to put up a temporary LTE signal. That's your cellular carrier signal, so that they had some kind of temporary ability to communicate. And to the picture to the immediate right of that, on the last row on the bottom, you can see a drone that's flying. It's now being used to fly in wildfire situations, and it gives us the ability to determine the fire spread, the direction and the head of the fire. It gives us the ability to determine the distance, separation between the head of the fire and the firefighters. It also can give us some imagery of hotspots. And in fact, in one mission that they had gone and flown and were returning from, they actually found another fire in a very early stage and were able to extinguish it again as they were returning. In the middle here, you see a bunch of buildings and stuff on top of each other. That's from Puerto Rico during the hurricane. And again, it gave the ability to fly over areas that were inaccessible, that were dangerous, and gave the ability for them to determine if there were people in need and the amount of devastation. Next to that picture on the bottom row, you can see tank cars from a train car. And what we're able to do with the thermal imagery is look at it, determine the level of the substance that's in the actual pressurized vessel. So we can see if it's a third of the way full, if it's 3/4 full, and we can see if there's fire impingement on it, we can see how it's affecting the tank by the heat signature that gives off. In addition to that, it gives us the ability to do sensing, remote sensing of hazmat. And so there's a lot more that goes into this. As you look at the last picture on the right, what you can see is one of the earthquakes in New Zealand. And you can see, you can fly over areas and see what's been affected from roadways in excess areas that you might not be able to do otherwise. So one of the things I want to share with you that we did this past year, we worked very closely with the FAA. And one of the things that we were able to do, and to set kind of the stage, In most cases, up until this point, when you're flying an unmanned aircraft system in the United States, you can only fly within visual line of sight, only what you can see. We were able to work through the FAA to create what's called a tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver. This is probably one of the most significant things happen to us in public safety. And allows us to fly 50 feet above buildings, not to exceed 400 above ground level, and 1,500 feet lateral from the remote pilot, and to discontinue as quickly as possible. Now, the reason for this is that if we get into an active shooter situation, we can't have the remote pilot out in an area that he could be literally in the line of fire. And second, if we're on a hazmat incident, we go through and create what are called cold, warm, and hot zones, and people can't go into those zones because it requires decontamination. Now it allows us to fly beyond visual line of sight for these type of incidents and keep our remote pilots and our visual observers out of harm's way. So it's a major advancement for public safety. So I mentioned tethered drones, and one of the things that's interesting about tethered drones is in the 2018 Reauthorization Act, I believe, it said that an actively tethered drone can be flown up to 150 feet above ground level, which does not require remote pilot certification. It does not require a COA, nor does it require a visual observer. Now, the interesting thing about a tethered drone is the tether provides a continuous power stream, so it doesn't require any logistical changes. In a model that's happening in the United States today, Pierce Fire Apparatus Manufacturing has put into effect with PhotoCon their situational awareness system. And that's designed that when you arrive on the scene, it's a one-button push, the drone is up in the air, and you have both visual optics, the normal optics that you see on a camera, and the ability to flip over to a thermal image by the switch with the flip of a button. So one button up, you're able to see, you're able to maneuver the aircraft to look at what you want to see, change it from normal to thermal, and one button push lands it. And that's as hard as it gets, or as simple as it gets in this case. So one of the things that's starting to happen now is police indoor drone training. Indoor flights for police is particularly helpful because they can go in now and do building searches and not put themselves in harm's way, whether it be an active shooter or they're just trying to find a suspect who's suspected of a violent crime, a murder suspect, or whatever it might be. Indoor flights are unique in that they do not fall under FAA regulations because we're not flying in the national airspace. So law enforcement can fly in the buildings as much as they want to in any of the areas without any issue of regulations. So let's talk about COVID-19 and drones. So COVID-19 kind of created some interesting situations. And I'm going to go around this loop here real quick and kind of talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess. So one of the things that they were used for was improved situational awareness. What's happening in the community now that we've got all these people that are supposed to be in lockdown? Are there people still out? Are they breaking curfew? Are they gathering too many people, and so forth? And then we started seeing communication through speakers where drones were saying, "You're too close together, please separate, you're not maintaining your social distancing." So the problem with that was, in many cases, the speakers weren't of a good enough quality that people could understand. So it sounded more like, "Yeah, please move away," and nobody could hear. So that created some disturbances and some ineffective uses. Plus, people started getting the feeling that they were in a sci-fi movie, that they had drones flying over them, watching them and telling them what to do. So that didn't go over well. In some cases, they were flown in areas to prevent theft and unlawful activities, so there could be an overwatch in areas from a safe distance and not have to worry about law enforcement officers being in contact with people. In some cases, again, like the social distancing, it was used for conducting head counts to determine if people were over, and then they would send law enforcement in if it wasn't being done correctly. And the same for social distancing. And the same with lockdown and curfews, which I already mentioned. Now, in Connecticut, there was a new drone that came out that had the ability to do body temperature scanning. It could look at the algorithms of a cough and some other signs that might indicate that a person had COVID. That didn't go over well. The community stopped it and said, that's just going a little too far. And so that really didn't take hold. One of the things that is working pretty well is the spraying of disinfectants over large areas like stadiums and those kind of things. So we're still seeing that happen. And we're seeing a really increase in the delivery of medical or essential supplies by drones. So an idea here would be replicated like what Zipline's doing in Africa, and I think they're into the hundreds of thousands of flights of flying drones for many miles to deliver medical supplies, blood, whatever it might be, to these underserved areas very effectively. So it's been kind of an interesting experience through COVID, and some good, some not so good. So one of the things I want to talk about in law enforcement missions is that what we have done is we have put together a document in cooperation with Skydio called the 5 C's. And the 5 C's are basically, they're on our website, and they're the principles for flying to maintain public trust when you're flying. And that means be transparent, don't do random surveillance, be open about what missions you're flying, engage the public, work with the ACLU, all those kind of things. The other thing is, if you're going to start a program, you need to start with doing an overreach or community involvement up front. You sit down with them, let them put their hands on it, let them see demonstrations. Again, as you're doing the missions, keep telling about what that is. So there's an exciting new aircraft that's coming out, and I'm just going to kind of go through really quickly. I'm not going to say anything as far as intricate details. I'm just going to give you some ideas of what's coming and things to look at. So one of them is the DJI Matrix 300 RTK. A lot of departments are seeing the zoom capability on this, rangefinder, and some other things, able to track certain things, is a phenomenal aircraft. It's kind of built for a lot of cinematic type of things, but it's really been proven to be successful in public safety. The next is the Skydio X2. This is one of the drones that meets the Blue Drones requirement that was put out by DoD. Next is the Autel EVO2. And again, this has both visual optics and thermal. Another popular aircraft that people are starting to use. And then there's the Parrot Anafi USA, and this has both visual and thermal, and it also has the ability to look up, as does the Skydio X2, and it also is one of the meets the Blue Drone requirements. And then the PhotoKite, again, I mentioned before, is now an actively tethered drone with both visual optics and thermal. And it's tethered to either in a compartment of the apparatus on the cab of the fire apparatus, or even in a box that can be then transported to different places and set up by itself independently. So when I talk about drone responders, one of the things that we found early on that we're working on a regular basis is we're working with ASTM, which is an international standards body, and we're doing what's called the Training Standardization Initiative. And we're working with ASTM to develop some of the standardization for training of public safety remote pilots. And we're also we're a partner with the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, on standard test methods for small unmanned aircraft systems. And they set up these different types of obstacle courses, which is now being used in France, in Japan, I think some places in the UK, Canada, and in many places across the United States. And it gives a practical proficiency model. There's an inexpensive way of setting this course up, and if you want more information about it, you can write an email to me. You'll see that information at the end, but it's charles@droneresponders.org. And what it does is it sets up this course that gives you a methodology for determining the practical proficiencies. It's not an end-all or a be-all. It's a tool to start in the basic practical proficiency training and measurement. So let's talk about the 2020 Public Safety UAS survey that we did as the Airborne International Response Team and Drone Responders. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we learned. And this did involve some people from the United States and from other countries. So the first thing we wanted to understand was who are using unmanned aircraft systems by discipline. And what we can see here, not surprisingly to most of us, law enforcement is ahead at 42%. Fire rescue is at second at 37%. Emergency management comes at about 12.5%. And other is usually your search and rescue and some of the other types of programs that are outside the normal stream of discipline. And then EMS healthcare just starting to come into it, where they're doing medical supplies, test kits, and similar type things. And we wanted to know, how long have the teams been operational? And what we saw is that now we're starting to have more departments that have some maturity. So we saw about 34% of the departments were in place for 3 years or more. And you'll see what effect that has when we talk about some of the pilots as we go on. And then it was 2 years, and then less than 1 year, and then 1 year, and then exploratory was still up there, people still looking and learning. But we're seeing the departments come on board and joining in this movement of getting unmanned aircraft systems in their departments much quicker than we have before. And that's because the information's out there, they're seeing the successes of other departments, and that information is being shared more readily. And as you can see, just in case you want the full study, the URL is at the bottom of the screen, so you can go look at it and use it any way you like. So then we wanted to find out just how many mission types are being flown. And actually, to our surprise, we hadn't really sat down and kind of thought about this. We identified more than 17 use cases. And so what you can see is some of the things that we talked about, but I'll just go down the list very quickly. Crime scene investigation, COVID-19 support, damage assessments following storms, incident command and control, live streaming of being able to get that real-time situational awareness. Hazardous material response is huge, and hazmat itself. We're able to use the drones to fly in and do remote sensing, determine what the substance is and the level. Is it an explosive level or not? Is it a toxic chemical or not? We're able to use the thermal imagery to look at the containers to see if there's a chemical reaction. We're able to look and see the spill and the direction of spills. And we can actually, if we want to, we can do remote monitoring of the actual level of the substance that we're detecting by landing the drone in a certain area that we can detect and turn the motors off and just let it sit and be our remote sensor. So then it will operate for hours without having to fly. And then we're seeing it used for mapping. And that mapping is basically for non-forensic related material. It might be for mapping facilities and getting information about what that looks like. And it's also used for public information. It was used a lot to show what type of activities were occurring during COVID on the news. And that's another thing that happens is the news is using the information to share what they see from a bird's eye view without having to put a helicopter up. Target search, which means search and rescue or looking for lost persons. We're seeing a huge number of successes where drones used at night, especially using the thermal imagery, being able to detect people out in areas, in large areas, large fields, might have been taking a long time to locate. And with cold temperatures, that timing could determine living or dying. Security overwatch, we're seeing law enforcement that will fly over a property in advance of a tactical entry, and they're able to see what the area looks like, position of vehicles, are there dogs in the backyard, and then they can also monitor that operation as it goes through and operate. And I will tell you one of the stories that came out of one of the sheriff's offices. They made an entry into a house suspected of drug dealing, and they ended up capturing one guy who goes out the back door, and there's brush and shrubs behind, so they couldn't make entry from the back. And he goes, before he goes through the shrubs, he peels off his black t-shirt and he has a pink shirt underneath. So he's already got kind of an idea of what he's going to do if somebody comes. So he goes out and he's walking the next street and he's in a pink shirt. So he doesn't realize the drone's up there because they're flying about 300 feet. And as he walks up the street, the police just come up nonchalantly and they say, "Hey, listen, have you seen a guy in a black shirt?" And as he comes up and walks to him, they arrest him. But in addition to that same thing, as people were coming out, they were coming out windows, they were throwing a gun on the roof, they were throwing drugs in the bushes, and all of that was captured on video. So the next I talked about structure fire response. I've already kind of gone through that well enough. Special event planning. We had an event in Virginia Beach where we had basically a performance, a concert, and they were able to fly and monitor the concert. And it also had a storm that came up on everything. They were able to use that to watch and make sure people were safely in areas that they needed to be in. SWAT-related activities. I know a friend of mine in York County shared an event where they had a suspect they were looking for, and they were going into a junkyard, and the SWAT team was moving in. Well, there was a lot of things in there like dump trucks and other vehicles that had open tops. And one of the things you don't want to do is a SWAT officer or a police officer is going over and trying to peek over and into something, not knowing if someone's there or not. So they were able to get a bird's eye view on all that and direct the SWAT team in the movements. And if there was it wasn't a suspect there, they couldn't find me, already left. But if there was a suspect there, they could be directing them the best approach and what the actual suspect was doing. In a swiftwater rescue, I've got a really cool video, and unfortunately I could have shown you all these things, but it would just take too long to show you everything. But in this case, the London Fire Brigade uses a drone. They fly down a person that's in swift waters and just drops a flotation device just as eloquently as you like right in the person's hands in the water. Training and exercises, the drones now give us the ability to watch what we're doing, capture it on video, go to thermal, give us different types of aspects of things that we couldn't see from the ground. Transportation of cargo and equipment. We're seeing that we can now, in a hazmat situation, as I mentioned, we have those hot zones, so we can't go in. If they've forgotten a tool, in the past, one of them would have to come out and go back in, and they're wearing fully encapsulated suits, which is very hot and very exhausting. And now the drone can actually come and drop the equipment nearby so they can continue the response. And then, as I mentioned before, wildfire responses, phenomenal activity that's going on there. And we're going to see continued changes and evolutions where the drones are going to provide a lot more logistical support and more firefighting capabilities with less hazard because there won't be a pilot in it. If you go back and look, we've lost several pilots in the past year in 2020 flying these missions, dropping water over the wildfires. So the number of missions flown per month, including training, we saw the highest number was 1 to 5. Then we saw the next highest 6 to 10, and then 21 missions or more. And what we found is that those 21 missions or more were those departments that had been operating for the longer periods of time because they have continued to evolve. So while we're talking about this, let me talk a little bit about the evolution that takes place during these types of situations. So when you start your program, you start off and you typically have an idea of the missions you're going to fly. So you start doing your training and you start flying. And then what happens is people start noticing that you're flying these missions. Then you have other organizations that are not flying say, can you fly for us? So now you've defined your missions from the start. You have chosen the aircraft that you're going to purchase. Suddenly your missions change, which now means you need different aircraft. It might be larger. You might need a better zoom. You might need light on it to be able to illuminate an area. You might need a speaker, and so on. So then it requires a different aircraft. Well, then because you're flying different missions and different aircraft, you have to have more training hours. So now you have to spend more time training your personnel, which means that we ultimately go into getting more remote pilots. So we have to get more remote pilots to spread the load. And one great example of a regional team and a multidisciplinary team is in York County, Virginia, where the fire and rescue, York County Fire and Life Safety, and the Sheriff's Office have combined their teams. And what's really great about that is we know that when we have an individual emergency on any one of our sides, if it's a fire, what's great is the Sheriff's Office flies. And if it's a law enforcement event, the fire guys fly. And so they get a chance to really have come together much more in unity than they have in the past because they're working together more closely. In any case, the fire department provides the SWAT medics, so there's a crossover anyway. But now you're sharing the load between two departments as far as the cost of aircraft, the remote pilots being split up, so one department's not having to cover the full load. So that's one thing that we highly recommend as drone responders if you're going to do this, is look at doing a multidiscipline team, looking at doing a regional team with multiple jurisdictions, because you get to get more types of aircraft and you're able to spread the burden over different people. The number of remote pilots, again, the highest number was 1 to 2. And again, we're seeing departments from the very small, just a couple of people, to more than 15, as you can see on here. And what we see, the more than 15 is usually those departments. There's two things. Either one, they're more mature than the others, or number two, there's some of the bigger cities that are starting to get much more involved in that and have more resources to pull into it. So one of the things we wanted to find out in 2020, what did COVID do as far as your purchasing? And much to our pleasure or liking, we learned that a majority of departments were planning to buy 1 or 2 new aircraft, and that COVID really hadn't affected them adversely at this point. So one of the questions we asked of our public safety programs that we surveyed is the FAA responsive to public safety UAS programs? And overwhelmingly 65% said yes, definitely. And I can tell you for one, that as a person who's worked with the FAA over the past 2 years, they have been phenomenal. They have been supportive, and they continue to change and work with us to develop the strategies forward. So what have we learned as far as public safety UAS programs? We know that they're more mature now, and that's impacting a lot of other departments because they're seeing what's happening. They're able to take their information as well as come to drone responders and get information. They're flying more missions and more types of missions than they planned, increase the number of remote pilots, and they plan to purchase 1 or 2 more UAS in 2020. Now, one of the things that I want to share with you is that UAS has become, they have become mission critical in public safety. And one of the questions that I ask in a number of the presentations that I do with public safety people specifically is I say, would you ever put your personnel or citizens in harm's way unnecessarily? And then after I've gone through all the use cases that I shared with you all, my answer is, if you're not using a drone or an unmanned aircraft system, you're doing just that, because there are so many hazards that you are not seeing from the ground. You know, another question I ask is, would you ever make a critical incident decision with your eyes closed? And the answer, of course, is no. But again, if you're not seeing some of these hazards, in a way, you're doing just that. So how do drones make the difference in public safety? So first and foremost, safety is enhanced dramatically for civilians and responders. There are over 500 documented cases of drones rescuing people all over the world. I would argue that's a very conservative estimate because what we also know is that drones made a huge difference in supporting the operations in all of the hurricanes, Harvey, and all of them, to the point where there were tens of thousands of flight in combination with manned aircraft without the first incident, but being able to help improve the impacts on the people that lived in those communities. The second is operational effectiveness. As you just saw in a number of those pictures, it gives us information that helps us make better decisions to be more effective. And I'll give you one great example. Many of you have heard about the Notre Dame fire. And what some of you might not know is that a drone was used to fly over and determine the best place to make the attack to stop the spread of the fire to the rest of the cathedral. Once they did that, then they used another robot called Colossus. And Colossus carried a heavy stream, hose stream into position and stopped the fire from spreading any further. So, fantastic. The third is situational awareness, real-time situational awareness. We're seeing things as they're occurring. We're able to direct resources to help them. One of the things that I forgot to mention about the Richmond protest is that as we were in progress, the group decided to do an unplanned protest march. Nobody knew what was going to happen, but what we were able to do is to fly the drone about 2 blocks in advance of the direction they were headed, to get the motorcycles to stop traffic at each of the intersections so that we could actually keep a separation between traffic and pedestrians. And nobody was hurt. So it was another success. And then disaster recovery. We're able to use not only to watch and learn what's happened and what we need to do, we also can use it to fly over and see the progress that's being made. We can see when the waters are receding, when the roadways are reopened, We can see when the debris piles are being removed, and it gives us an inexpensive way of monitoring and capturing that information. And all of this information becomes really important if you have a major disaster and you're doing a presidential declaration, because now you can take this imagery, you can put it on to, you can combine it into GIS layers, and you can have something that you can submit to show the people the actual damage that occurred. And really getting a drone up early on and capturing this imagery is really critical to show how bad it really got, because even hours later after an event, waters recede more quickly, and a lot of the things that were in place have receded. So it's important to understand. So let me tell you, Drone Responders is a nonprofit program under the Airborne International Response Team. DroneResponders.org is the website. It's open for anyone to join. You don't need to be in public safety. It is designed and focused for public safety, but it's not limited to public safety. And to join is free. One of the exciting things on here that we have is we have a, let me just kind of go through a couple different things here. So what we do is we try to balance the ecosystem. So we do three things. We work on enabling drones for good through standards, training, resources, and a global network. We also address the issue of countering the drones for bad, to identify, to locate the aircraft and controller, to mitigate unlawful or threatening U.S. flight operations, and managing the airspace is remote ID, universal air traffic management, air boss, integration into the incident command system operations, and so on. So we're looking at all three of those things. We see these as three legs to the stool that we need to sit on. As far as what we've done, we currently now have over 3,700 members, and we have participation from 47 countries. Now, I specifically went into this with a focus on the United States just because I knew that was a big enough challenge in itself. But because of the things and the resources that we have had people from 47 countries to come and participate. Part of that is because we have an online resource center that has over 600 public safety UAS documents. That's standard operating procedures, best practices, training, task books, checklists, and a lot more. We have a technical advisor program where we have a group of people that help provide some support in different areas, explore different opportunities. And we have a discussion forum with specific topic threads that people can come into and talk about these topics that we've been discussing. I'm proud to say that in October of 2020, we received the first place award for AUVSI, which is the largest unmanned aircraft vehicle association in the world. And we're very pleased with that. As far as what we're doing, we're working on the establishment of minimum training requirements for public safety remote pilots and certifications. We're working on developing a STEM project with multiple partners on public safety drones focused on girls to give them exposure and opportunities to learn about the drones, because there's a lot less women involved in it this time, and we want to show the opportunities both in public safety and drones. We launched the Drone Responders International Advisory Council because we had participation from 47 countries, and we've conducted 4 public safety UAS research studies to find out different aspects of drones and public safety and where we are. We're working on building a diverse organization of public safety, multidiscipline, geographic representation, expertise, race, and gender. As far as activities that are coming up in that we've been working on this past year, as I mentioned, the ASTM International Training Standard Initiative that we're working on, the Tactical Beyond Visual Line of Sight Weaver that we achieved with the FAA, a public outreach to promote drones for good. As I mentioned, you've got to be transparent. You've got to do this with the public first before you start any kind of program, because they need to know what it is and they need to give you their nod that it's okay. The next thing is data management and storage, processing, and analytics. And then we're in the process in developing phase 1 is a nationwide public safety UAS database and a map. And we're doing that with NASA Ames out of California. And we're working with Esri in a partnership to do that and also create a nationwide map. And phase 2 will be creating that global direct database and map. And then the last is the integration of GIS and imagery. As far as activity coming up, to let you know, we as Drone Responders do a global public safety UAS summit at the AUVSI Exponential Conference, which is the largest one in the world, in 2021 in Atlanta. And in that, we will have a major cities public safety UAS forum. We'll have a public safety UAS leadership discussion. and we'll be establishing the priorities and actionable objectives for the next year. We also provide National Public Safety UAS Summit at Commercial UAV Expo 2021 in Las Vegas. And then one of the latter programs will be the European Public Safety UAS Summit at Commercial UAV Europe in Amsterdam Week, December 2021. As far as our partnerships, we are partnered with about 20 different organizations, international and national. We work with the FAA to regularly network to create new operational waivers. We have now started as of January to facilitate monthly FAA webinars the second Wednesday of every month at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's 50 minutes of content with FAA bringing in different people each month, and then 40 minutes of questions. So we answer unfiltered every question that's asked in these webinars, and they're recorded so you can watch them later. We communicate specific FAA updates to the public safety and UAS community, and we're supporting stand-up of public safety stakeholders working groups of a variety of different things. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take us into, let's see, I'm going to take us into a video, and we'll see if this works. I'm going to first take you into a compilation of the videos that I talked about before as far as use cases. So sit back and enjoy, and we'll talk a little bit more about it after this is over. In this video, you're able to see the two camera views from a drone. To the left is visual optics, to the right is thermal imaging. On the left, you can't see through the smoke, but on the right, in the thermal imaging, you can see the fire, the heat signature, and the proper application of water to the fire. This is a horrific fire and explosion in Los Angeles City, California. What's important here is we're able to see the immediate time when firefighters leaving on the aerial ladder are fully engulfed in flames and injured. This is important because we know that EMS resources are needed. We can send the medical resources needed and also be prepared to put more resources where the fire is now expanded. This is a fire in an industrial complex. It allows us to see what areas of the fire are affecting the building. And when we have plans to know what's in the building, we know what's on fire and how to make the attack. This is the Notre Dame fire in Paris, France. Historic cathedral was affected. The drone was able to fly over, determine the best point of fire attack, and prevent the fire from spreading into the other parts of the historic cathedral. These images you see here and inside were also taken in advance of the fire by a drone. This is a video of a fire in California, a wildfire. In this case, you can see the magnitude, the areas that are impacted, and help to give a strategic plan as to where to make the best attack on this fire. In hazmat situations, we're now able to watch what's happening, maintaining an overwatch, doing remote sensing, determining what's in the tanks, containers, and also be able to see fire and plumes that we may not have been able to see before. In transportation accidents like this tractor trailer with its boxcar, we're able to fly into the back of the trailer to see what's on fire, take remote sensing. In these cases, they would be too dangerous for firefighters to get close to because we're not sure what is involved. We can get much closer. In this video, you can see the catastrophic damage from the fertilizer explosion in Beirut. You can see tremendous damage in the areas. This helps us understand, again, what's impacted and what resources are needed in the way of rescue and recovery. We're also able to take the drone in this very same area of the Beirut collapse and fly through the buildings in search areas that may be untenable because of structural integrity caused by the damage. So we can now do searching without putting firefighters or rescuers in harm's way. Hurricane Harvey in 2017 produced some of the most catastrophic flooding ever. In this case, we're able to see how bad is bad, roads closed, buildings impacted, and the people are in need of rescue. In Nashville, Tennessee, we're able to see here the tornado damage We're able to fly over the buildings and see from a bird's eye view the damage that's occurred, but we could also fly into those inside areas if necessary, as you saw in the previous video. But here we're able to fly over and more quickly be able to assess the damage than we would be able to do on foot. Again, this shows us the magnitude of the damage and the resources that we'll need to put our city back into normal. This is a video from the Mexico earthquake. Here we're able to fly over and see the damaged areas, destruction. We can fly over areas that are otherwise inaccessible by ground, and we're able to see if people are in need of rescue, and again, the magnitude of damage and what's needed for recovery. This is a landslide in Brazil, and again, we would not be able to go on foot in these areas, but we can fly over and determine if people are in need of rescue. We can see the damage that's occurred, and again, give us a better idea of what resources are going to be needed for recovery. In Nepal, there was a tremendous earthquake. I don't remember the year, but this software allowed us to fly over with the drone digital imagery and convert that all into a 3D model that can be used later to look at the buildings to determine how the earthquake impacted them, helping us better understand what building codes may need to be changed to protect buildings and people of the future. This way we can go back and look at it from all different angles. The volcanic activity in Hawaii created fissures. This was able to be monitored by the drone to fly over and determine the fissures' direction in proximity to homes and people. They were also able to use drones with sulfur dioxide detectors to determine toxic gas and to evacuate people that are in harm's way. Drones are also used for shark patrol along the oceans, and we're able to see sharks from a high overview proximity. Artificial intelligence can even show the difference between sharks and dolphins, and we can warn the swimmers and surfers. This is a protest in Charlottesville, Virginia. Unfortunately, a young lady was killed as the protester drove into the people. This was important because we're able to see what happened in real time and immediately activate medical resources to take care of those people that were injured. This is a police scene where a suspect is trying to evade apprehension, and you can see it's a night operation, and the thermal image gives a very good view of what's happening, and you can see the police officers in the different areas trying to capture the suspect. And while he tries to get away, he will ultimately be captured and uninjured. In Queensland, Australia, they've done it first by putting a drone on a motorcycle for traffic crash forensics. The innovation helps to reduce traffic congestion. It does that because they proved that it could cut crash scene mapping time in half. In London, this is an illustration of a swiftwater rescue situation where a drone can provide a pinpoint drop of a flotation to advice to someone moving quickly in the water. After 22 hours of being lost, this 83-year-old man was found by a drone. You will see it zoom in. You can see he is alive. His location is then provided to rescuers who make their way to him. They quickly report that he's hypothermic, confused, and up to his shoulders in water. And with additional resources, he is rescued. This is a story about a boy and his dog that are lost. This goes into the night, and a drone flying at night with thermal imaging is able to locate the boy and his dog. And here you can see that thermal image view, and they are now home safe. the Atlanta Police Department using a drone to fly inside the building, as I had mentioned before. In this case, they're looking for a murder suspect. And it's interesting because they are now making entry into the structure, into the room. And you can see that they have a light attached to this device. Now, keep in mind, they don't have a speaker. They're not able to communicate at this point. But you'll see what happens. They're able to go in, look around the room. So they've essentially cleared that first room without having to make entry. And as they make their way back and the light shines into the different areas, the suspect realizes that there's a drone. And you can imagine being a police officer walking into these areas looking for someone who's a murder suspect who is reported to have a gun and armed and dangerous, that you could be shot at any time. So he sees the drone. He comes out, puts his hand behind his head, and he walks out, and he is apprehended with no further activities necessary. I will also share with you that in a similar situation, a drone was flying over a person who was fleeing on foot, and after he looked up and saw the drone, he just stopped and laid on the ground. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you into kind of our drone responders video, and I hope you'll enjoy about 2 minutes of this. And that's it for my presentation for this evening. So now we can go into any types of questions and answers that you'd like to go through, and I'll be glad to give it my best shot. And if I don't know, I'll make something up. No, just kidding. If I don't know, I'll get the answers to you and get back through Rick and share the information. Again, DRONERESPONDERS.org. It's free. Anybody's welcome to join. Love to have you. Do we have any questions? Let's see. The first question I see here is, do you expect drone pilot to participate as volunteers? Well, it's unless you're a member of a volunteer organization, it's difficult to be a volunteer unless you find a department that's actually accepting volunteers. But if you're interested in your Part 107 pilot, what I've said to people is one of the things you need to do is get in your mindset of public safety. So go in, drone responders, look at the resource manuals and information that's out there and see what it's like. And then also FEMA has courses online, FEMA 100, 200, 700, and 800, which can all be taken online free, and you can get a certificate which gives you that incident command background of how operations work as far as drones. Let's see. Is the FAA involved when using them indoors? No. Also, I want to give a shout out to George Purdy, who I talked to early on, and provided some information to him, and hope things are going well with him. And he was going to be on tonight, but unfortunately, he's in a fire station that the VPN wouldn't allow him to connect with us and be in the conversation. So I'm a little disappointed that we didn't have that chance to share some things that are going on here. Are schools in the area around the perimeter considered airspace that would require a license? Well, if you're flying an aircraft, unmanned aircraft system of any type, you have to either be a hobbyist, and hobbyists are limited to fly in specific areas. But if you want to fly as a commercial pilot, you have to have Part 107 to fly anywhere. But if you're a public agency, you can get a COA, a certificate of authorization, and be able to fly as a public aircraft operation and have a little bit more flexibility and get that tactical waiver that I talked about earlier. And you can also, as a public safety agency, operate with the COA and Part 107. Each one of those sets of rules are different a little bit in some ways, and you have to choose at each mission what set of rules you're going to fly under. Let's see. This is the best. Never knew this was all out there. Just bought a drone. Okay. Yeah, and if you're interested in getting started, there are different organizations. I know DroneUp for one, at droneup.com. You can actually go in if you're a Part 107 pilot, and you can sign up to become a pilot under that system. If they have a job in your area, they'll reach out to you and see if you have the right waivers, and you can get paid for it. Are there volunteers, background checks done on volunteers? In most cases, there aren't as many volunteers, but if you're a member of a volunteer organization, there usually is some kind of background check done. Can we have students use a school drone to take video of the school campus? Well, that would, unless they're Part 107, they'd be a hobbyist, and they might not be in the area. What some schools have done is they've elected to start a training program themselves and get some waivers to be able to train and have the kids actually fly and take photographs and then learn how to use them in the schools. But typically, you just can't go out and take pictures of the school with a drone. No. All drones have to be registered, and if you're a remote pilot, you have to get Part 107 certification. Can I provide the links to the information? Yeah, basically, I think I was talking about FEMA, and it's FEMA.org. Actually, FEMA.gov. Actually, both of those I think work, but FEMA.gov, and you can look up, let's see. I'm putting this in the chat room for everybody, so. And again, all those courses are free and online. And once you're complete taking the test, you'll get a certificate. So Rick, what's next? You're muted. Rick, you're muted. That's the number one thing said during COVID is that you're muted.
Yeah, but I hope you can hear me now. Can you?
I can.
You got to confirm if you can hear me. Nope.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi. Can you hear? Okay. Sorry about that. There was a little technical there. What a wealth of information you brought to all of us in Hawaii. And you know, we all into making beautiful images and shooting with drones and getting video and stills. But what you brought is another layer that we all have to understand. And understanding how entities can use the drone to better public safety and security is incredible. So we really thank you for bringing that to Hawaii. It was a fantastic presentation.
It would have been better if we could have had George on here with us, but you know, maybe another time.
Well, those out there, we did have George Purdy, who's a fire chief at Lanai Airport, and also somebody who operates drones for the Department of Transportation. And we had a little technical difficulty that his station computer was unable to log into us. I guess it's a security issue that we all understand. But you know what, George, if you're out there, save your thoughts. We'll have you back, and we'll make sure that we have a good computer so you can tune in with us. Charles, how do you see Hawaii these days with as far as what you see for drone responding? Do you see any of our people, our entities, HAIMA and such, bringing anything that you know of to the islands?
Yeah, I know that the fire department was working on a program early on before the volcanic activity. I think the volcanic activity was kind of a precipice, if you will, that kind of showed the different things that could be done and seen from a safe distance, but to give knowledge that was critical to what was going to happen next. And like I mentioned, the sulfur dioxide sensors and being able to evacuate an area that might have killed people. So I think the USGS was out there involved. I know CRASAR was involved from Texas. So a lot of people got involved, and I think it's continuing to grow in Hawaii as far as in the public safety world.
Yeah, great. That's good to know. You know, what we all hope is that one day we can have you come out here and join you on a flight and a little more talk and a little get together, which we'd all like to do in Hawaii.
Well, you know, it's interesting that my daughter and her husband, he was in the Army, so they actually spent I think their first 3 years assigned in Hawaii. So we had 2 grandkids. So my wife had maneuvered herself to make 6 trips out to Hawaii. And unfortunately, because I was still working and doing other things, I couldn't go, but she certainly enjoyed Hawaii. And so I'm hoping that I can make it out there and be out there with you guys in person, share some ideas, learn from what you all are doing, and you know, just have some fun.
Can you put in your calendar September 11th and 12th?
I'll put it down.
Let's see how we can make that one happen, Charles.
Yeah, so I would tell you in 2019, I guess 2019 before COVID, I had a chance again to go over in Birmingham, England, and give a presentation on drones, and again they're using a lot of the stuff that we have, the websites there, and yes, all this information is on droneresponders.org as asked in the question marks.
Yeah.
And I can make the presentation, and you have the presentation videos, so if you want to make those available, that's fine.
Great, thank you very much. We will do so. You know, once again, for everybody out there, Charles is with DRONERESPONDERS.org. I recommend that you have a look at his site. There's just a huge wealth of great information on how drones are being used for the safety of all of us, and to utilize the skills and the technology that we're all benefiting from with the latest technology in drones. Charles, I have one question. You were talking about smoke sensors and different types of operations that can go, utilities that can go onto drones. Are these third-party types of add-ons that people found that they can add to a current drone, or does the manufacturer have to manufacture it so it's got that capability?
So the way it started, for example, DJI, which has the largest market, started off with using the FLIR thermal imaging. So they were using someone else's camera. They've now gone into making their own cameras. But on the others, you're seeing usually it's a third party. Some of the drones now are actually coming out with their own payloads, but we're also seeing different types of payloads. Like now we're seeing spotlights that can illuminate an area, that can help doing crash reconstruction at night where we couldn't do it before. And there's a group that I've been working with, gosh, I can't remember if I think it's Australia, that they're working on a new microphone that has the ability to eliminate the background noise of the aircraft and actually listen on the ground, and being able to vary the scope, the range. So it can go from a 30-degree angle to be more precise, or it can do wider to listen if you have somebody yelling, or if you're flying over someplace. Then once you get there, you can actually focus your signal in, and in very, very good clarity tell them, stay where you are. We know where you are. Help's on the way. Just, don't keep moving. So it's, yeah, a lot of things. And then we're seeing, what else are we seeing? And let me put it in context. When you look at a drone, what the drone is a vehicle. The most important thing about what the drone does is the data. So it's either the visual optics, it's the thermal imagery, it's actual individual digital snapshots, it's video streaming, it's remote sensing, it's spotlights, it's speakers, it's and now we've got it to where we're able to go and do catch and release, so we can take a device and drop it over into a hostage situation where it might be a phone, and the phone can be dropped into the person that's holding people hostage and be able to communicate with police and begin negotiations.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's just it's so far reaching that really the only limits are the imagination and of course the FAA regulations.
Yeah. Well, we're living in a time, Charles, that we've got technology just ramming at us, and how we utilize it and embrace it for good is really up to all of us. And that's why I feel it was so important for you to come and come to Hawaii this virtually and bring us your information. This is a starting point. And I think everybody really enjoyed that. And I thank you for that. I just want to give everybody a heads up that this is, of course, our very first virtual workshop for 2021. And if you missed it, we'll be at, we'll have many more virtual workshops between now and September 11th. And then as long as we all behave ourselves and we can have it out at Kualoa, September 11th and 12th, we will be on location where we'll have a whole array of different types of workshops, from aquatography to portraits to weddings to you name it, we'll have it. And we look forward to seeing everybody and being able to embrace you and not have to look through the camera to say hi to you. Any thoughts?
It's been a pleasure, and if I can be of a resource to any of you, my email is charles@DRONERESPONDERS. Do like everybody else does, and they send me emails, and I typically get about 200 emails a day, and somehow muddle my way through all those and answer each and every one.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for your willingness to share all of this knowledge. We all really appreciate it. Folks, I think that we can say aloha to Charles. I thank you all for being with us. Charles, if you'd like to end it with anything else, we really appreciate you being with us.
I think that one thing I'd like to say is that, we've had 2020 is one of the most challenging years that any of us have had in our lives. And I think it's really about all of us coming together and figuring out how we can help one another, whether it be with drones or other ways, giving blood, helping someone out in need, whatever it might be, food, donation to the food banks. So take this opportunity to go out and do something to help others, and let's all get through this together. That's my message.
Very good. And a good quick shout out to George Purdy. George, will catch up with you. Ted Ralston, Scott Allen, thank you so much for bringing us all together. Aloha to everybody, and thank you, Charles. We really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Aloha. Bye.